Okay, this is part 2 of the soldering tutorial for silver, and you can apply it to other metals too. But I'm just dealing with sterling silver and fine silver. So, what you see here is my soldering pad. This thing right here. It's pretty scarred, got holes in it, been burned a lot. That is the surface that I use to solder things on. So it's a horizontal surface. So I try to do everything pretty much on a horizontal plane unless I have to use something like a third hand, which is this little device right here, which sits on a base, and this can hold pieces vertically or at an angle, so you can attach that to something that's sitting on the soldering pad. So there's a couple of things. Whenever I teach classes here where I live, I usually spend about an hour talking about this process. I'm going to try and condense that a lot. But it's important to hear the basics and the tools and what they're used for and all that. So I'll start with that. This could end up being like part 10 before I get done with it, but I'll try and keep them to like 5 minutes per video. What you need is a soldering pad. Now if I heat this here, it's on my dining room table, I know that the heat will not transfer down to this piece of wood, and it definitely won't transfer down to the mat. And my wife's gonna go crazy if she sees that I've been filming this on our kitchen table. But anyway, this is a soldering pick. I recommend everyone gets a soldering pick. This will help to move a piece of solder on your part or parts you're soldering if it happens to move when you are heating your piece, which happens very often. It can also be used to pick up a tiny piece of solder like this when you're heating it with the torch, and then once it's on the tip of the titanium, I believe it's a titanium tip, you can actually grab it, it won't fall off, and you can then put it exactly where you want it and kind of like turn your pick and drop it wherever you want to place it. I'll show you that later on. You also need a brush. This is a regular brush I bought from a craft store. I recommend you buy them in sets of 5 or 6 and get the fine brush at the end. It's hard to see, it's kind of, this is kind of stiff. But this is to apply flux, which is this stuff, flux with it's a poison. So I just put that on there so we know what it is. And it's kind of a yellowy liquid. And this is it is a solution that's used to keep a joint clear, clean, and assists in the flow of the solder when you actually reach melting temperature. Without it, I believe you could solder, but it's going to be very difficult. So you use that, you apply that with a brush, that solder, and you put it onto your piece or pieces, wherever the solder is going to go. If it's a joint or if it's a butt joint or a T-joint, whatever it is, and you will see it bubble when I get to that part. I'm going to put this in front of you so you can see where I got it from. Most of my supplies are from riogrande.com, and this is called Mighty Flux, self-pickling, blah, blah, blah. That's the part number, 50400. That is the number to call, 1-800-545-6566. They're in Albuquerque. They usually get your order out the same day. It gets to you priority mail in approximately 2 days, way faster than UPS, at least where I live. So I buy all of my products there. I don't usually buy stones from them. But tools, accessories, whatever, I usually buy from them. My silver too, and my solder too, gold too, pretty much everything except stones. So they're totally a good company. I've used them for over 20 years, and the people you talk to know what they're talking about. Anyway, back to this. Right here I have 3 different kinds of solder. There are 4, I believe, but I only use 3. And one is hard, one is medium, and one is easy. What I do to identify them is I cut a piece of copper out, then I've drilled a little hole, and you can see that I've stamped an E on there. This one has H, and that one has M. So hard, medium, and easy. So hard I'll put there. the point of this is that the hard solder they have different melting temperatures. The hard solder has a higher melting temperature than the medium solder. The medium solder has a higher melting temperature than the easy solder. So if you were to do an operation, 3 things on one piece, and you saw with those earrings that there's up to 7, 8, 9, whatever, you would start with hard, then you would go to medium, and then you would go to easy. I tend to just use one hard now because I've gotten used to what's going to happen, the mistakes that might happen if I overheat my pieces. But when you're beginning, it's really important to remember what you use first. It's always you start with a hard for the first operation, then you would go to medium, and then you would go to easy. This is wire solder. You can buy little, they're called pallions, little boxes of tiny little squares. I like to use the wire because I can wrap it around here and I know what it is. It's not going to come off. And I cut it with a tool like, let me just cut a tiny piece off. This is the medium, so let's look for that. You can see the M for medium. So I'm going to cut with my end cutter right here. I would cut a little tiny piece like that, and I'm going to place it right there. Can't even see it. So it is right there. That tiny little piece, and it's not, who knows, maybe that was a millimeter. It doesn't matter. Just play around with this when you first start. That can join a piece of silver to another, that little tiny amount. It's kind of hard to figure out how much to use, especially when you're beginning, but most people tend to use too much, and in that case you will flood your joint. It'll be messy looking, so you basically need to use just the right amount to fill. It's not filling a gap, it's to assist the two ends joining together. Whatever kind of joint you're making, it's just enough to penetrate both ends so that when you're finished, there shouldn't be a bump on it. It should just look flush. You'd still have to clean it up, but it should look flush. So the difference between this, which is actually brazing, but I'm going to keep calling it soldering, and soldering with an iron, when you have that lower temperature thing, where you're just touching the lead core metals that join 2 pieces of metal together like they use in electronics, is that this, doing brazing, you're actually heating the 2 pieces up together. Say there's 2 pieces of silver, and so I'm going to put that there, and I'm going to put that there, and all right, say I want to join these 2 pieces together. They're not quite fitting right, but you get the idea. So I would put flux, I would brush flux all over this area right here. That's the only area of contact, although you can see that one's sticking up in the air. There we go. So flux all this, and then I would put a piece of hard solder maybe over here, and I would put a piece of hard solder over here. And I usually avoid putting them on top because they tend to splatter on the top, and it messes up this, and it messes up over here. If I put it here, it would just be it's potential for a blob, and you want to avoid that. So in there, touching the soldering pad would be the best place to put it. Heat up both pieces at the same time, and then when both pieces reach the melting temperature of the solder, which is lower than the melting temperature of the sterling silver, it should run along the line. And then you take the heat away right away, and let it cool. You can put it in water right away using tweezers. Never pick these things up. They get red hot. You'll see when I do actually heat a piece up. They stay hot for a long time. So I've burnt my fingers many times. So that's one thing to look out for. Use tweezers as much as you can. Remember not to touch pieces if you don't know if they're hot or not. And I think I will make that it for now, and I will continue in the next video.